Let me start. So, Amish, I was reading somewhere, one of your interviews where you mentioned that the origin of these stories comes from what you heard from your grandparents. I think you mentioned Banaras in one of your interviews, which was interesting. So I'll ask a very different question. So incidentally, I also got a lot of my knowledge of scriptures from my grandparents. So it was similar. They used to tell a lot of stories, and they were just absolutely amazing. So Amish, do you, from whatever you heard, is there any kind of a underrated or lesser known thing that you believe that deserves a bit more kind of inspection and more which has just we have lost somehow? Is there any such one story or a character that you feel has kind of got lost based on whatever you heard from your grandparents, but it's very interesting?
There are there are so many. There's an entire you know because our culture is not a culture of one book. It's a culture of of a massive library, and there are so many that have been lost. But among the things that is worth talking about, something which I discovered from my father, because in my family, as you said rightly, my grandfather was a pandit at Vishwanath Ji in Banaras, and used to teach at Banaras Hindu University physics and mathematics. And my grandmother on my mother's side was also a teacher, was principal of a school at Gwalior. And in our family, if one can be honest, from our grandparents' generation downwards, the blessings of Goddess Saraswati have been coming down, and the blessings of Goddess Lakshmi have gone up. We were very poor, very, very poor, 3 generations ago. But they had a lot more knowledge because a lot of it was learned from the family. Our education system teaches very little. Our education system is still sadly very colonial. It is such that पढ़ा लिखा के बच्चे को अंग्रेज बना दो. That is the approach. So there's one thing which I want to say is not so much from our ancestors, something which all of us should know. This is something that my father told me. You must read the constitutional debates that happened between 47 and 50. You will be shocked to know that there was a proposal to make Sanskrit our national language. You will be even more shocked to know
Wow.
that primarily the representatives, the members of the Constituent Assembly who were supporting it were actually Dr. Ambedkar and largely South Indian MPs. They were supporting the adoption of Sanskrit as our national language. Sadly, the others opposed it. Okay, and therefore Sanskrit did not become our national language, which I think was a critical loss, right? Because every language has some links to Sanskrit. If Sanskrit was a national language, we could seriously mutually understand each other relatively easier. More importantly, Sanskrit is the key to our ancestral knowledge. And that key was lost, that opportunity was lost. Now I don't know if it can be revived now. It's too late now. Now English is our link language. Perhaps the most important thing would be to translate as many of these texts as we can to English, and maybe we'll have a
Correct.
small bunch of experts studying Sanskrit. There are lots of schools in Bangalore, in Coimbatore, in Pune, which are actually teaching Sanskrit quite well. Few in Kashi, but yes, it is not as widespread as it should be. So the fact that we lost this opportunity when our constitution was being debated it's not from our ancient stories, but this is something I discovered from my father, and this is something all of us Indians should be aware of and really regret that we missed an opportunity. Let's not miss the opportunity for the next 10-15 years when we have the money, when many of these manuscripts can be translated, saved, and let's relearn our knowledge and at least teach the next generation all that they need to know.
So in fact, one of my little projects, like as a memory project, has been to actually learn the Vande Mataram and that Shiv Stotram in its Sanskrit form. So I thought, before Alzheimer's takes over, I should, if I can remember that stuff, then I can always go back and say, okay, there's one thing I remember. But so the interesting thing is that at least I believed, and I'm sure it's all true, that the people who were the smarter.
But if you really want to take this up, there's this there's this beautiful hymn called the Atma Shatakam,
Okay.
which was composed by Adi Shankaracharya ji. It is in my, and I'm not just saying that because I'm a Shaivite, but just that hymn is among the most beautiful there ever is, and it truly gives the essence of what uh, our philosophy is supposed to be. No difference of caste, no difference of male, female, nothing. That just Chidananda Rupa Shivoham Shivoham. I am Shiva. That's what the thing is.
Wow.
Just learn that hymn.
Definitely.
There's a hymn you want to learn. Learn that hymn.
Definitely. Absolutely. So my thing was that obviously in the olden days also there were people who were smarter and more intelligent, and then there were the others. And lot of our religious beliefs are actually commonsensical things that people preached to say that this is ये करने से पाप होगा, but it was actually probably just good practice, or basically like the classical one is that if you are going to the Samshan Ghat and you come back, you're supposed to have a bath, and it's religious cleansing, but it was just plain cleanliness, I suppose, right? That you just wash yourself so that there is no you don't contract anything. So uh, uh, can you kind of give us any examples of that? I mean, I think people, like you said, were much smarter. They kind of converted everything to a religious practice, which unfortunately we carried forward as religion, but we never really understood the commonsensical nature of it.
Look, there are many ways in which we are smarter. We've got tech, which is fantastic. We've got, but there are many things. The assumption that civilization always moves in a curve like this is not necessarily true. Civilization actually moves like this, right? As a sine curve. Civilizations rise, they're at their peak and they decline. And the key thing is, can your civilization have the resilience and the ability to remember the lessons learned from your rise, from your peak, and your decline, right? So yes, I mean, if you're talking about rituals which made sense, like the thing of the evening puja, at least in our community, it used to be out there, the Sandhya puja, and then after that you don't eat. If you think about it, that is intermittent fasting, right?
Yeah.
Without that after sunset you will not eat because you've done your puja at that time. You can only have water, right? Simple things like tulsi outside the house. Tulsi, we all know, is actually very, and fresh tulsi is what you should actually have, not packed and preserved tulsi. You have fresh tulsi, and they built a nice story around it, so every house had one, right? And you pick the fresh leaves and then have it. Now these are all good practices which help you lead a healthier life, but this is at a base level. But what if one thinks of it at even at a more philosophical uh, kind of broader level, right? That our ancestors used to think about and evaluate what are the things that went right, what are the things that went wrong. When they used to, in the Puranas, used to speak of kings, or empires which rose, stabilized, and then died. Then they would speak of what are the lessons from that empire, so that as a society we don't make that mistake. Now, if you think about it, as a society, do we have the introspectiveness of our ancestors? That for the last there was a time when India used to beat back every invader. We rarely sent invading armies outside of the Indian subcontinent. But there was a time when we used to beat back almost every invader. The same Huns who destroyed Europe came to India as well. Skandagupta thrashed the daylights out of them and sent them back. It's there in our history. We all know that, right? But then there came a time when we started losing to every invader from the 11th century onwards. What changed in our society? Do we even introspect? Right? That in the last 1,000 years, why did we lose repeatedly when there was a time when we never used to lose? Right? Do we even evaluate? Do we have that thing of looking back and what are the lessons learned? Right? And you must do lessons learned honestly, because so that you don't repeat the mistake. Right? I think as a society we need to do that too. We are the most ancient culture that is still alive. We're the only pre-Bronze Age culture that is still alive. Think of the number of cycles we've been through, of rises and falls. Think of the number of lessons we would have learned, right? But do we still, from our heritage, do we still remember those lessons at this time? we are rising once again, right? How do we ensure that we don't repeat those mistakes? You should at least make new mistakes. Don't repeat mistakes that were made earlier.
No, definitely. So just a little aside question I have is that
So-
in your books you always just write Amish. You never write. I mean, was there a? I mean, I'm sure that was not a question because there was no typo space. It must have been a conscious decision. Is that a reason why you did that?
There's a lovely line in the Bhagavad Gita. Chaturvanyam maya srushtam guna karma vibhagasha. Lord Krishna says that he created the 4 varnas on the basis of guna and karma. That is your guna, your qualities, your attributes, and your karma, your deeds. It doesn't mention birth anyway. Your status in society was supposed to be based on your on the work that you do, not the births that you had, right? For example, Maharishi Satyakam Javali, who was the Raj Purohit of the Ayodhya royal family during Lord Ram's time, was born to a single Shudra mother. He didn't even know who his father was. Didn't make a difference. Forget about a Brahmin, he became a Rishi. Right? So it was based on your guna and karma, not on birth. What we have today is actually a corruption of what our ancestors taught. So I thought I'm not saying it's some big statement or something, but I thought I'll make my small statement on it. That judge me for my guna and karma, not for where I was born. I should earn this surname. I shouldn't be born into it. That's all right. It's a statement from my end.
That's a wonderful way to talk about a casteless society, which is what we need to do. Before we go into the next segment, one last question for you.
You don't need to revive him, Lord Shiva, man. No one like him. And with complete respect to all other gods and goddesses, complete respect. I'm a dharmic. We respect all gods and goddesses. But Lord Shiva is just so cool, and that is actually what we need in today's day, right? He doesn't differentiate between anyone. He blessed Lord Ram. He blessed Ravan as well. He doesn't look at you by where you were born. He looks at your karma. And if he thinks your karma is not good, as Ravan's was beyond a point, he took back his blessings. Right? Doesn't differentiate between men and women. Doesn't differentiate between devas and asuras. He can exist within society. Within the bounds of society when he has to. He can be a rule breaker when he has to. He's cool and fun. He knows how to enjoy life, right? He's the lord of dance. He's the lord of music, but he's also the originator of the Vedas, of yoga. So he knows how to lead a balanced life. He's very much of his band of brothers. Shivji ki Bharat. And anyone can join, but at the same time he'll be a damn good husband as well, a very good father. If we can learn from him, I think society will be a lot better and a lot more fun.
And therefore praying that we create a lot more balanced Lord Shivas amongst the men in this country. I'm going to take a pause till we go to the next segment and come back soon. Stay tuned. We are going to be back with even more fun questions and interesting insights from Amish.